Thank you very much, Shazan, for that very kind introduction. Thank you for going back and reading all of my speeches as Governor of the Bank of Canada. That puts you and my mother in that thing. I'd also like to thank Colleen Kennedy and the Canadian Club team for getting this together, hosting us. And our sponsors. TD felt a bit, because they're always last in the order, so I'm going to start with TD and work my way to Agnico Eagle, and then remember that I can remember Canada Life, but not the other one, because there is a fourth. Right? There is a fourth. Bruce Power. Bruce Power. Who could forget about Bruce Power? Well, Bruce Power is going to come up, at least implicitly in this speech. Look, it is an honor. I'm very grateful to have this platform this evening, or this afternoon. It will be the evening by the time I finish. Did anyone actually watch? Did anyone watch Champagne's budget speech, by the way? I had to. I was sitting next to him. And hour and 20 minutes. Hour and 20 minutes. So this will be slightly shorter than Champagne, who I see is coming to the Canadian Club, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So take the afternoon off when you come for that. But every word is gold from him. But the main thing is Amber is going to interview me shortly, and then you're going to have some questions. But I'm going to spend 15 minutes probably. I was only given 10, but I'm going to spend 15. Champagne minutes, 15 champagne minutes going through a few things about the budget. And in part because, just starting with this platform, the Canadian Club, obviously illustrious history here, and prime ministers have come here over the years, and occasionally at times of profound change. William Lyon Mackenzie King visited this forum to promote the war effort and the aftermath in 1943. Brian Mulroney came to the club in 1988 to argue for a free trade agreement with the United States. I'd like to argue for a free trade agreement with the United States. He was a little more successful on that. He argued for that successfully, as we all know, and was prescient because this was on the cusp of what was would become a decades-long process of greater openness and deeper integration around the world that led to great prosperity. So the point is that, the history of nations, certainly the history of Canada, is punctuated by such times when our actions can be decisive. And we're in one now, to be clear. We're in one now. Technological change is accelerating rapidly. The world has become more dangerous and divided. And that decades-long process of an ever closer economic relationship between Canada and the United States is over. And as a consequence of particularly that last point, many of our former strengths, based on our close ties to America, have become our vulnerabilities. And this is happening fast. This is not a transition, it's a rupture. And it means that our economic strategy needs to change dramatically and rapidly. And that's the context. That was the context for Tuesday's budget, the first of our government. Now, in the budget, we estimate that U.S. tariffs and the uncertainty that they're creating will cost Canadians about 1.8% of our GDP. Translating that, it's about $50 billion lost from our economy, the equivalent of about $1,300 for every Canadian. And if we don't act now, those losses will only grow. So part of our point is that nostalgia is not a strategy. The U.S. has changed, that's their right. But we must respond. That is our imperative. What the budget does is it builds Canada strong by focusing on what we can control. And that's building at home to protect and empower Canadians. It's boosting our productivity to drive lasting prosperity. It's transforming how government works for you. And it's diversifying our trade partners to create more opportunity and greater independence. We estimate that the budget, measures in the budget, will help unleash over $1 trillion in investment over the next 5 years. And that alone will increase our GDP by 3.5%. That's about $3,500 for every Canadian. In other words, twice of what's being taken from us. Le budget 2025 est la nouvelle stratégie économique dont le Canada a besoin pour relever ce défi et en sortir encore plus fort. Un Canada confiant qui prend son avenir en main. Et pour y arriver, on doit s'attaquer aux pressions économiques de longue date qui vont au-delà des droits de douane. So what I'd like to do is highlight a few elements of that strategy before that conversation with Amber. The first, as I said, we are building at home by making generational investments. We're working to create the right conditions to get big things built in Canada. In June, we passed the One Canadian Economy Act to remove federal barriers to internal trade and to fast-track the approval of nation-building projects. In August, we opened the Major Projects Office, headed by one of Canada's most accomplished CEOs, Don Farrell. That office is a single point of contact to get nation-building projects built faster, projects that will connect, diversify, and propel our economy forward, projects that will expand our exports to new partners, and projects that will create hundreds of thousands of good-paying union jobs for Canadian workers. Last month, we announced the first tranche of these major projects, $60 billion in investments in nuclear power, in LNG, carbon capture, critical minerals, and new trade corridors. Ces projets comprennent des ports, des corridors énergétiques, des projets d'exploitation de minéraux critiques et des initiatives en matière d'énergie propre qui permettront de mieux connecter notre économie, de diversifier nos industries et d'accéder à de nouveaux marchés et de créer des carrières bien payées. Les 5 premiers projets assignés au Bureau de grands projets représentent au total un investissement en capital de 60 milliards de dollars. Et ces investissements touchent toutes les régions du Canada et contribuent à la croissance de chacune d'entre elles. Now, with respect to this, we are just getting started. Our next tranche of nation-building projects will be announced next week. And we're creating new strategies, from critical minerals to high-speed rail, sovereign cloud, all to drive tens of billions of dollars in further investments while creating the conditions for a better connected, more productive Canadian economy. Our new defense industrial strategy, led by one of Bay Street's finest, Doug Guzman, will help leverage the over $80 billion, yes, $80 billion increase in defense spending over the next 5 years, including in AI, cyber, space, quantum, and other dual-use technologies. So it's not just about protecting Canada, it's protecting Canada first and foremost, but it's an enormous opportunity to build the cutting-edge industries of the future. Our climate competitiveness strategy will help drive hundreds of billions of dollars in investments, hundreds of billions of dollars in investments in nuclear, in hydro, wind, storage, and grid infrastructure to position Canada to lead in the low-carbon economy. We will also build local infrastructure. That means new hospitals, transit, recreational facilities, art centers, through the $50 billion Build Communities Strong Fund. Because Canada Strong means Edmonton Strong, Brampton Strong, Drummondville Fort. Build Canada Homes will help double the pace of affordable housing constructions within a decade using new factory technologies, cutting building times by 50%, reducing costs by 20%, and lowering emissions by 20%. So that's the build element. But we're also creating new trade relationships with reliable partners, with an objective to double our non-US exports over the next decade. That's $300 billion in new orders for Canadian resources, technologies, and expertise. It's new jobs for Canadian workers. In the last few months, we've signed a historic free trade agreement with Indonesia. We've struck agreements with the United Arab Emirates in AI, with the EU in defense, and with Germany in critical minerals. Last week, we launched free trade negotiations with Philippines and Thailand, targeting conclusion by next year. alongside a new free trade agreement with the ASEAN countries, countries that represent 20% of global GDP. And we are re-engaging with global giants India and China. Now, the third element is to boost our productivity for that better standard of living. I think this room knows that the last 10 years, productivity growth has been slow, to put it mildly, in Canada, growing by only 0.3% annually, lagging most of the G7. Le nouveau gouvernement du Canada réalisera les investissements générationnels afin de stimuler la productivité et de relancer la croissance économique. Et il le fait en position de force. You know, the core problem is that investment in Canada, including business investment, has been flat over the last decade. Somehow we have stopped taking risks. And to help reverse that, we're boosting Canada's investment tax advantage. Budget 2025 introduces a productivity super deduction to reinforce Canada's position as the most tax competitive country in the G7 for new business investment. This super deduction allows immediate expensing, 100% write-off, for a wide range of assets, including manufacturing machinery, equipment, and buildings, clean energy generation, patents, data networks, infrastructure, intelligence infrastructure, and computers, as well as capital expenditures for research and development. We are expanding on top of that, so this is stackable, investment tax credits for clean energy investment, including for clean electricity investment by public utilities, and for a range of critical minerals. So all these measures reduce our marginal effective tax rate. There's not many rooms I can say marginal effective tax rate and not have to define it, but this is one of them. It lowers our meter by more than 2 percentage points to 13%. That is substantially lower than the meter in the United States, even after the one big beautiful bill. US is at 17.6. Our meter at 13 is about half of the G7 average of 25%. Le Canada a toujours accueilli des gens du monde entier qui sont au sommet de leur domaine. À l'heure actuelle, avec l'évolution rapide des technologies, nous avons besoin de plus. Alors le budget 2025 déclenche notre stratégie d'attraction des talents internationaux, doté d'une somme de 1,7 milliard de dollars. 1,7 milliard de dollars pour le talent, afin de recruter plus d'un millier de chercheurs parmi les plus qualifiés au monde. Nous augmenterons également le nombre de migrants économiques à près de 2/3 et mettrons en place un programme cible pour attirer les titulaires de visa H-1B américains talentueux. So $1.7 billion for the world's most talented researchers, 1,000 of them, and targeted H-1B visa recruitment from the United States. Because we do have the best educated workforce, and we do have some of the world's best research universities. But when you are good, you know you have to get better, and that's what we're going to do with talent. Now, part of driving productivity is competition, because when businesses, you know this, when you face competition, you work harder, you innovate more, and you serve your customers better. And Canadians benefit from lower prices, higher quality products, and more choices. So this budget will boost competition and innovation in the telecoms industry by making it easier for Canadians to switch between internet, home, phone, and cell phone plans. And will advance open banking to give consumers more control of their banking data and more options for their money. Ces mesures créeront un climat plus concurrentiel qui obligera les entreprises et les banques à innover et à investir dans leur propre développement. pour accroître la productivité et réduire les coûts pour la population canadienne. Now, the fourth and final element is transforming government to make it more efficient and effective. Do you think that? I think it's possible to make government more efficient. We think there's a bit of room there, yes. And our core to our approach is spending less so Canadians can invest more. And let me explain what that means. It's a new capital budgeting framework that distinguishes between day-to-day operational spending, which is the vast, vast majority of government spending, includes transfers to individuals, transfers to provinces, most of the daily work of government. We distinguish those from the long-term investments that strengthen our economy, such as the productivity superdeduction, which costs the government money, but you make the decision whether to draw it down. The fact is that for the last decade, federal spending overall has grown more than 8% year after year. That is twice the rate of growth of our economy. So in this budget, we slash direct program spending to just over zero. And we balance the operating budget in 3 years. This will save Canadian taxpayers a total of $60 billion over 5 years by restructuring operations, consolidating internal services, and right-sizing programs. We are reducing the size of the federal public service by 10%. We are cutting management consultants by 20%. And in parallel, what's freed up from that is capital investments as a share of total spending will more than double from its historic average of 4% to almost 9%. That means over $450 billion in capital investment to help crowd in the private investment that Canada needs. There's two final points I want to make. And the first is, yes, this is about building, but it's also about how we build. We will build inclusively, in full partnership with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. We will build in solidarity with workers, creating good union jobs. The coming decades are going to be great times to be in the trades. And we will build sustainably, focusing on low-emission energy, transport, housing, and manufacturing to strengthen our competitiveness, because reducing emissions is not just a moral duty, it is an economic imperative. Above all, we will build Canadian. We'll be our own best customer. With our new Buy Canadian policy, when the government spends, we will select Canadian suppliers by default. No more will over 70 cents of every dollar of Canadian military spending go to the United States. This budget takes pragmatic, responsible choices to right-size government while protecting the essential social programs that every Canadian, the programs that give every Canadian a fair chance to get ahead. So that includes childcare, dental care, pharmacy care, the National School Food Program, as well as the health, education, and social transfers on which the Deputy Minister of Finance of Ontario and his colleagues across the country rely. We protected it. Did you say thank you? No. Because we could. That was a choice to governors to choose. But this is important. It's important for our schools, for our health care, for our people. Let me finish and just observe that there are two potential responses to what's happening in the world, what's happening with U.S. trade policy. And the first is to stick to plans designed for the old world. The second is to create a new plan for a confident Canada that will prosper in the new world. And let me objectively compare the two before you. First, we can hunker down, slash the deficit, turn inwards, and in the words of the tragically hip, wait for the trickle down. Scott, what do you think? Okay, I'll hold your vote until I get to the second. That would mean getting rid of our key social programs, eliminating all of the health, education, and social transfers to the provinces and territories, while not investing in what we need now. Or Secondly, we can take risks, and we can invest boldly in our future as Canadians have done in the past, because our country's history is filled with adventurers, risk takers, and builders. It was forged by Indigenous peoples and voyageurs who mapped the continent and built vast trading networks from coast to coast to coast before the Americans had even left St. Louis. When the Second World War ended, Canadians united in a mission to build big things. New neighborhoods for hundreds of thousands of returning veterans, new universities to launch new careers, the St. Lawrence Seaway, the Trans-Canada Highway, Expo 67, the CN Tower. See, we used to explore in this country. We will chart new courses again. We used to build in this country. We will build big, fast, and bold again. We used to take risks in this country. We will step up to the plate again. We choose Canada. C'est notre pays. C'est votre avenir. Avec le budget, nous reprenons le contrôle pour bâtir un Canada forward. It's our country, it's your future. We're taking control. Let's do it together. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Nice to see you again.
Good to see you again.
You mentioned in the budget productivity, I think 137 times, and I feel like it's already working. We're all at work on a Friday, and the men are wearing ties. So we're already seeing it. This is your first budget as Prime Minister, yes. But every budget, I think, it comes with the same dueling complaint. You spent too much and you didn't spend enough. So let's address some of the criticism. That maybe you didn't do enough. That if you're going to do deficits, really go after it for the business community, corporate taxes, take an axe to regulations. And you do that in certain ways. Some tax rates do go down. But if you really wanted it to be sweeping and not just competitive with the US, but ultra, really go after it with tax cuts and reducing regulation.
Well, I think the first thing, I agree with your characterization of budgets, and it's a balancing act. One of the things that comes, let me break this into a few points. One is we are spending a lot less. Basically, we're stopping spending growth, but we are investing at the same time. We made a big effort, $60 billion of savings that we're finding in order to preserve what makes Canada Canada, the social programs, the federal-provincial relationship. So we preserve those, and we're using our fiscal room, our fiscal space to invest. And it is big. It is big. It's far and away the biggest investment in defense, far and away the $450 billion cash investment equivalent over the next 5 years. That is enormous. We're doing it in a way that still preserves some fiscal flexibility because the world, we're still AAA. We have the lowest deficit in the G7 going forward for the next 5 years. We have the strongest balance sheet in the G7 and most of the advanced economies. So we still have fiscal flexibility because we're in a more dangerous world, and you don't want to spend all of that at one time. So we think we have absolutely the balance right. Now let me go to the tax point. We are 4 points. This is a sophisticated room. We are 4 points through the United States for investment. Okay? You have to be able to calculate what a sales tax is as well as what your top marginal rate is and what accelerated depreciation. That is a big gap. That is a big gap. Now, it is not the only consideration, of course, in making investment. If it were just tax policy, Ireland, I guess, would have the largest. Ireland's got a lot of quasi-investment. They don't have a lot of real investment there. All due respect to Ireland. Sorry, I mean, okay, that's a whole other
cause and international.
Exactly. The regulation point is a crucial point. Fully accept that. The way we're attacking that is through the nation building projects. So we have an ability with nation-building projects to balance regulatory decisions across what's in the best interest for the country, what's going to advance us becoming climate competitive, what's going to advance indigenous interests, and there are a huge range of things. We've been in government for 6 months. We've made a bunch of those. I think you can see the direction of where the government is going to go. I guess the other thing I would say, before I hand back for your last question, since I've answered too long for this one, is the other thing I would say is the actual investments we're making as a government are very strategic in that they unlock. So I'm going to take advantage of, this may not be directly relevant for Anaco Eagle, but we're doing first mile and last mile investment that helps unlock huge range of critical minerals and others across Canada because you just can't get to them. The whole Grays Bay Point in Nunavut, port in Nunavut, opens up the Northwest Territories, Nunavut, northern Alberta, opportunities there. So a lot of what's been holding back some of the investment, we're attacking with strategic investment.
Why is the government deciding what's in the national interest and what projects get? Can't everybody have access to that?
Everyone can have access, yeah. No.
Constrained growth?
Well, first off, there's certain things you want your government to do. And one of the things you want your government to do, look, I'm sorry, I'm going to pick on this table here. It is unrealistic to ask one company, however big and successful, to build all of the transportation infrastructure into the Ring of Fire, La Fosse de Labrador, the entire Northwest Territory. That's like the government's job. Unlocking ports and port infrastructure, that is also our responsibility. Providing so there's certain things that we do that is our responsibility. And what we're determining with the provinces, with input from the private sector, with input from other stakeholders, is where are we going to get the highest return for doing that? That's the first element. But the vast, vast majority of the investment that's catalyzed by this budget is decided in rooms like this and the organizations that you represent, because it's the productivity superdeduction. That's just somebody has to decide to build the data center, the infrastructure, the ITC, again, looking at the table here, Bruce Power has to decide what they want to do in terms of expanding their generation fleet. So most of it is decided by the private sector. We've just advantaged it tremendously. So
when they've already made the decision to go ahead, you're at least expediting all the checks that you need to.
In many cases we are, but we're also just making the economics of it.
But there are people, you know this, that just...
Such a downer.
You did a great job, but Riley, I'm going to bring us all back down to earth. You know that there are people...
We're not coming back. No. No. Amber.
Hey, I don't want to
Amber,
be
no,
there.
like that. We've had too long down, looking down, not taking risk. This is like this. The risk is not to take risk. In a situation like this, you've got to decide where you're going. And we got to put capital to work in the country. So you bring us down, okay, with that.
I'm not going to bring you down. Yeah. I'm going to say, why can't we go even higher? Let's use the energy sector as an example. Yep. There are a lot of things that are preventing them from even bringing a major project to your office, according to them. Bill C-69, emissions cap.
Nope.
I mean, that's what they say.
That's what they say, but they're wrong.
Why?
Yeah, they're wrong. No, they're wrong because literally we are getting projects coming in. We're in discussions with the province of Alberta directly on things. But look, we've also got a view that as shared by the government of Alberta in the grand bargain, I'm going to quote the Premier of Alberta, that the future of oil export is going to be low carbon. So twinning additional, in that case, oil sands development with carbon capture makes sense. By the way, it also helps create a multi-billion-dollar industry for Canada. But you say energy. Look, we are in a position where the country can grow its grid, clean grid. Our grid is basically clean, 85%. Can grow our grid 50% over the course of the next decade, 15 years. That is an enormous amount of investment. We're talking about $150 billion of investment. Think of the scale of the nuclear investment that's likely to happen, that we will with the province of Ontario, some other provinces, Alberta, Saskatchewan, likely, we will help advantage and get going. So sometimes this discussion about energy pivots down into, is this pipeline going to happen? That is, I mean, don't worry, we look at those issues. It is a totally different ballgame. You look at the scale, sorry, now you've got me on a run, because you look at the scale of LNG exports that are going to come. The first shipment of LNG to Asia was in June from LNG 1. We'll be at 50 million tons by the end of this decade. It's likely to double by the end. And every single jurisdiction, I was in Asia last week, every single government wants that LNG. Right? We're in a position, we are putting ourselves in a position to export that. And by the way, that LNG, which will displace coal in most cases, so there's environmental benefit, it is, in most cases, top quartile, if not top decile, low emission, scope 1, scope 2. So in other words, the liquefaction, other processes are clean. And we're advantaging that with our tax proposals in the budget.
One of my questions was, is this pipeline going to come?
So boring.
It's not actually.
It is. No, but it is because don't worry, we're on it. We're on it.
And
but
who's
there is
showing
this
up to
whole
that
world.
party?
Okay, hands up. Who's working on the pipeline in this room? Okay.
Isn't that a problem?
No. Look at all the variety. Like, Nav, we have.
Yeah, if there's more prosperity, they'll get more cell phone services.
But look, okay, so what's going to drive, one of the things don't worry, we're on the pipeline stuff. Danielle's on line 1, don't worry, it's going to happen. But, well, something's going to happen, let's put it that way. It's not very good negotiating by my perspective. But what some in the room will unlock on the data center side, the intelligence infrastructure side, will have a much bigger impact on productivity in this country. Will have a much bigger impact on our standard of living. And advantaging that, which is what we're doing with the productivity super deduction. Like, it's an easy conversation to have about a pipeline because it's one thing we can see. But the reality is that there's much, much more to the Canadian economy, and there's much, much more to the future of the Canadian economy. And so we're attacking it on all sides.
Well, let's go to the big number you throw. You're winning.
No, I'm not. It's not a competition. We're all in this together. We're all in this together.
The big number you've thrown out is $1 trillion that you think you can get from private investments. And you've also said you've been going around the world. You're making these trade deals with other people. You've said we need to diversify away from the United States. So how much of those conversations did you bring into this budget? What I'm asking is, what is in this budget? Is in this budget that is a response to feedback that you've received about what it takes to get those investment dollars in Canada over anywhere else?
That's a great question. I think it reinforced. They're all great questions, just to be clear. Even the pipeline one was great, but it just went on for a little long. The reinforcement on the scope of the super deduction. I think that's important. Like, you got to make it easy. So sometimes these things get sliced too narrowly. I used, back with Howie, we used to work in the Department of Finance, and the tax department likes to keep things very narrow. If you're a business, you don't want to think about, and particularly if you're a foreign investor, one of the things is people don't wake up in the morning and think of Canada. And so when they think of Canada, it has to be easy for them to think about it. Okay, it's got the lowest tax rate for investment. I'm going to have regulatory clarity. There's lots of people know this, there's lots of institutional capital in Canada, and very strong banks, so I can get financed if I'm going to move forward. So I think those elements are there.
The U.S. is doing that too, though. So what is the extra thing that Canada?
Well, we have rule of law. That's one of the big things. So that's true. Well, I think it is an element there, and it's also, look, the nature of the country. Like, this is, we're not perfect, but this is a diverse society that thrashes things out in open and comes to decisions and moves forward. Like when you think of that talent strategy, which I referenced in the budget, the 1.7 billion top 1,000 researchers, you have academic freedom, you have stable universities, you have societies you want to bring your kids up in, and particularly if you combine that with ambition, kind of Canadian ambition that we're going to move forward, it's very attractive. And in part, that is a response. That talent strategy is a response, admittedly somewhat anecdotal, a response to push from those types of people that we would like to get here.
Since we're on the topic, universities are generally struggling under the change of immigration, reduced immigration, so there's less enrollment and more lucrative enrollment. And so I'm curious about how you expect that tension to play out. On one hand, lower immigration that we've seen in the past, which was historically high, but on the other hand, a strategy to attract more people.
Yeah, so first, let's put this into context. In 2018, temporary residents of Canada were about 3% of the population. When I became Prime Minister, it was 7.5% of the population. I mean, that is an enormous shift in a very short period of time, and far exceeded our capacity to create, our ability to welcome people and make sure that they had good housing and services, and if they went to post-secondary institution, that they were actually getting a proper education. I mean, case at University of Toronto, but there was a series of places that sprung up and expanded too quickly, and they weren't getting good education. So we have to adjust it. And what you have now, and just again, so we're all on the same page in terms of the changes, asylum seekers are down by 1/3 this year. Temporary workers as a whole are down by 50%. That's the inflow. Students are down by 60%. So that's because we're taking back control of our immigration system. So we're actually managing the numbers. Now, it is a big adjustment, as you say, for the funding model of a number of post-secondary institutions, which tells us something about the funding model of post-secondary institutions. You can't freeze tuition, not provide additional education transfers. I mean, we are still transferring education. I'm sorry to pick on the province of Ontario, but we did protect those transfers. And then just rely on a compounding number of foreign students that are paying high tuition.
Your key message is, go ahead.
Well, one of the key messages, around that is, look, we are managing immigration. We're managing it from an extreme position, just relative to various reasons it ended up. Some of it was COVID, some other aspects, and we're bringing it down relatively gradually to our target is below 5% of that 7.5% by the end of 2028.
One of your key message, and it came out in today's speech as well, but really over the last 6 months, is we must diversify away from the U.S., but you obviously can't ignore that will remain a key relationship for business and the economy. And I would love, that's key for a lot of these businesses. Might not be a pipeline, but certainly the U.S. Is key. There was definitely a tone shift by the U.S. when you became Prime Minister. I think everybody saw what that was. And I'm wondering if you could help illustrate for the room what drove that tone shift, what was different about what you brought to the table that had them a little bit friendlier towards us. And for these individuals in the room, like how can they win in the U.S.? It's still important for business to win in the U.S.
It's hugely important, and it's hugely important where our trade relationship settles out. What caused the tone? I don't know. I think like almost anything in life, people respect you if you're straight with them, and I'll give another example with President Xi in China last week or so when I met with him. I mean, part of the conversation was just about, okay, how are we going to deal with each other, and what's off limits, and where are we going to actually discuss? I mean, so I think there's
Is that similar with the U.S.?
I mean, the president can discuss anything. You never know where the conversation is going to go, to be honest. So he's got a very wide range of interests. With the U.S., so but for people, because it's, we're all, it's a serious, there are a couple, I think, realities. One is that the U.S. policy, this is why things have changed, to the world is to charge access to their market. Okay. I mean, the president uses the example. Sometimes he says Costco. More often he says like a country club. Costco is obviously a lot cheaper than the country club. So we like Costco. Yeah, I like Costco. No. So one, they're going to charge access. We actually are not paying an access fee on most of our exports. 85% is tariff free. So we, and to a lesser extent, somewhat lesser extent, Mexico are in a special position because of what they call USMCA, we call CUSMA. So that negotiation is very important where that goes for obvious reasons.
Are you optimistic we'll retain that privilege?
We'll see. We'll see. We've got we have some cards, but it's, like there's a reason why we are very focused on building here and building out and what we can control, because we can influence, but we certainly can't control where that's going to land. That's the first point. The second is the U.S., irrespective of that, has all of these strategic areas, steel, aluminum, upholstered furniture, literally, under so-called 232s, again, this room will understand that is the same rules for everybody. And so the ability to get a different deal on that depends on what else you're bringing to the table. And that's part of the negotiation, and it's part of the negotiation that is temporarily, we're taking a pause.
You're taking a pause.
Well, they're taking a pause. I'm ready.
What do you think it takes to unpause? Is it just time? Do you have a strategy to reignite interest?
Well, look, I think it is in our interests, obviously, but it is very much, there are certain areas where it's very much in the U.S. interest to adjust the arrangements right now. And then, they'll make their own judgments on that, but we'll see. We're ready. I expect it to come back at some point.
In your speech, and it's come up a few times, you've talked about defense, and obviously that's going up around the world. And help this room, I guess, understand, that might sound like a thing we're just doing because we're being asked to do it and it's a bugaboo south of the border. But you also talked about those dual uses and actually being a driver of growth. Help us understand your thinking around that.
So it's huge. Thank you for bringing it up, because so first, we're not going to spend money on defense just because all the other kids are doing it. I mean, to be clear, and we had catch up to do because we weren't spending enough. Secondly, the world is more risky, and certainly the Arctic is much more risky. The risks in the Arctic are considerable, let's put it that way. And even in the time that I became Prime Minister, one of the first decisions I took was that we would have, sea, land, and air forces there 365 days a year. Like, we only had people up there 4 months a year. It's not really asserting sovereignty in that way, and there's a lot more that comes with all of that. So the threat environment's gone up. The third thing, and then obviously the threat environment for NATO has gone up, and so we have collective security, so our contribution there has to go up. So directionally, there's lots of reasons why it goes up. And the fourth thing, which gets into a lot of the dual use, is the risks are obviously, they're online and they're in space. And so AI, cyber, quantum will be important for lots of reasons, but it will be important for defense. Now, you roll all that back here is, okay, we need to spend a lot more. We are going to spend a lot more to do our core job. The core job of government, the first job of government is to protect people. So we have to do that. But we want to do it in a way that maximizes the benefit for our economy. And where are we going to have relative advantage relative to other countries? Well, actually, in AI, quantum, cyber, those are real Canadian strengths, and those will increasingly be integrated into defense, but also in all parts of our lives. So I'm going to the Vector Institute after this, right? For not for some, well, for obvious reasons, because that's part of our advantage. So we can leverage our defense spending in a way that's going to help our economy as a whole. And then the last point around it is, we're going to make a big sub-purchase, again, for the Arctic. Either Korea or Germany, Norway have a consortium. Guess we want a substantial proportion, not so much of the construction, but the service. These things, the real spend is after you buy them. So the subs, aircraft, all that, we want industrial benefits here in Canada.
We have some audience questions. We'll take a few of them. The first question from Don Johnson: why didn't you remove the capital gains tax on donations of private companies and real estate in the budget? It would have stimulated $200 million per year in charitable donations.
I look forward to Don's letter for budget 2026, I think is the, sorry, Don. Well, Don's here, obviously. There he is. Okay.
You've called this a generational budget. He got something to say.
He's got a rebuttal.
Yeah.
He's got the letter already.
You've called this a generational budget. What does this mean to you, and how do you hope these investments will shape opportunities for younger Canadians in the years ahead? And I'll buffet it with my own question. We can't ignore deficits that don't seem to have an end, and that is a tab for a future generation, potentially. How does this room get comfortable around that?
Okay, so let me start with the macro, that question, then I'll go to the younger. They're both related. So the first thing is, over the forecast horizon, debt to GDP is flat. So again, and we are in a different neighborhood than other major countries. Switzerland is with us, and it is a very, very exclusive club in terms of overall. We've got to be careful, but and we will be. The second is, in a situation like our risk is that this economy doesn't grow. Our risk is that doesn't grow is too strong. Sorry, strike that. That was Chatham House rules. That one is Chatham House rules. I did not say our risk is this economy doesn't grow. Our risk is that this economy, that was a comma. Our risk is the economy doesn't grow fast enough. In other words, we don't get the productivity up. And that's what gradually gets you into a more difficult debt. And we're in a position where there's a fairly substantial restructuring of this economy that needs to happen because of the change in the world. Okay, the way you do that is invest. And so that's why we're pushing, but focusing on investment. We are only running a deficit for investment, okay? And we're not reclassifying things that are current spending as investment. It's only for long-term investment. So that, for the younger generation, that does a couple of things. One, it makes it more likely the economy is growing, so as they come into the labor force, there's better jobs. Secondly, more directly, for a subset of the younger generation, it actually gives jobs. It creates, literally, we're going to create hundreds of thousands of jobs in the skilled trades. We're working with the unions, we're working with post-secondary institutions for the skills training that's going to be required, so we have enough people from plumbers to electricians to pipe fitters, welders and beyond, in order to actually build the country out. There's more that needs to come, particularly in and around AI and mass application of AI. Our AI strategy is going to come out in a few months, which will have a big focus on that. We're going to, if I can give you the kind of arc of what we're doing, and I'm going to oversimplify, which is that this budget, investment, generational investment, focus on that. Then what comes with that is skills, youth, getting people, youth, the next generation. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
It's true. So that people can take full advantage of it, so all Canadians can take advantage of it.
Okay, one more number before I wrap up. How many seats do you need to have a majority?
I can't remember.
Do you want to answer?
Need a couple.
Just a couple.
That's
all right.
a couple. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister.
So call your local MP if they're not a Liberal and
Yeah.
tell them to come on. Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Thank you. Very good.